Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us at our coffee and conversation about working together toward ADA compliance. I'm Sean Berry. I'm the newest addition to the T2 Center. If you haven't met before, I replaced Melissa Evans after her retirement. So I'm happy to be here and happy to be doing this with you this morning. So this morning we're going to be talking we're going to have three different presentations from three different instructors. And we have with us Tom Roy, Director of Public Works from the town of Simsbury. We have Mike Wilson, who's a senior planner with the Western Connecticut Council of Governments, and Katie Hedberg, who's the ADA coordinating engineer from the Connecticut Department of Transportation. Each one of them is going to talk about their efforts toward getting their town or towns or the state working toward ADA compliance. So we'll be starting off with Tom Roy. And like Lisa said, if you have any questions, please enter them in the chat and we'll go over them after Tom, and then we'll be time at the end. So Tom, take it away.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Just share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. So yeah, my name is Tom Roy. I'm Director of Public Works and Town Engineer in Simsbury, Connecticut. Simsbury is kind of a rural community, especially considering that we're talking about sidewalks and sidewalk ramps. We're just under 25,000 people, 7,500 residential homes, 191 roadway miles, and not a lot of sidewalks, just a little under 15 miles. We have a few in construction right now. Since we're talking ADA, the big thing today is going to be curb ramps, and we have just shy of 325 curb ramps, and the total town is just under 35 square miles. Simsbury is a very rural community. The residents take great pride in that. So it was very interesting. A couple years back, we did a pedestrian bicycle master plan. One of the things that came out of that was very surprising is that a huge percentage of our residents really wanted sidewalks and wanted to improve the walkability of their neighborhoods. It was really a informative study for me, and that I thought I understood what the community wanted and needed, and to see the results come back that people didn't feel safe walking in their neighborhoods on the roadway, and that traffic speeds, delivery trucks, things like that really rose up high as reasons why they wanted sidewalks. With that, we worked with a consultant beta group to do a sidewalk and curb ramp assessment in 2019. And as I said, it was kind of building off our pedestrian bicycle master plan. It was also because it was required by federal law. I think Katie's going to talk a little bit more about the law as we go forward, so I'll leave that to her. But the key points with the federal compliance is that we needed to have a schedule of improvements. We needed to do a self-evaluation, and we needed more than anything compliant curb ramps and crosswalks. Most importantly, and this really came to fruition when we presented this study to our Board of Selectmen, is it's the right thing to do. It made it a very easy sell to start developing a program. The first thing we did is we needed to know what we didn't know. What do we own? What do we have in terms of our assets? We went out and we did a full inventory of our sidewalks and curb ramps, good field collection, making sure that we got all of the data. We did our data analysis. We worked with our GIS mapping, making sure that our maps were accurate to where there were sidewalks. And sometimes we had gaps. We had maybe two properties that for whatever reason didn't have a sidewalk, and now that became an impediment. So that was one of the things that we worked hard on identifying. We worked on prioritization. Which sidewalks did we want to fix first? And really that came down to the ones that were going to get the most use, the ones around schools, shopping center, businesses. Kind of focusing on what's going to get the biggest impact as soon as possible. We came up with a schedule for our improvements. And as we started to go through the process, the next step is always managing and tracking the data. How are we doing? How are we keeping up with the plan? Are things coming to fruition the way we had hoped? Drilling down a little bit more into the assessment of the curb ramps. We were looking at the ramp location, obviously, material type, whether it was in concrete, asphalt, or some other material, and general condition of the ramp. Was it poor? Was it good? Did it have a tactile warning strip? As we looked specifically at the ADA compliance, we were looking at the ramp dimensions, the slope. We all became good friends with a SMART level. Really great for ADA compliance for anybody who does home construction or carpentry. It's just too accurate. All of a sudden, everything you're doing is never going to be perfectly level. We were looking at the detectable warning panels, looking for visual obstructions. Did we have a sidewalk ramp that was leading right into a utility pole? Did we have a sidewalk ramp that was leading right into a catch basin, which would not be appropriate and certainly wouldn't meet the standard we were looking for. And of course, did we have a crosswalk at the ramp location? Sadly, when we did this in 2019, the results didn't come back very good for Simsbury. Of the total 308 ramps that we had at that time, really only 8% were compliant. That's really the hard pill to swallow, that when you go out and do a study and it basically says you're in a bad place. The good news is we had nothing to do but improve from that point. This is, I think, going into the 6th year of this program. We've dropped that from 8% being compliant to we're close to 55% right now compliant, and making huge gains on that. If things come through as we're planning this summer, we may really target our ramps this summer, in which case we'd be looking at maybe getting 100 ramps done this summer alone, just to bring ourselves up into compliance. In terms of the program, we had 7.5 miles of sidewalk that needed to be redone. We had that 283 non-compliant ramps. We had mentioned before the prioritization of the walks and ramp near schools and businesses. We replaced our neighborhood sidewalks in smaller rural streets, cul-de-sacs, with asphalt. We did concrete sidewalks along our busier arterial roadways and along state roadways. We gave ourselves 15 years to bring our entire program into compliance. It was a really good discussion with our Board of Selectmen at the time as to how could we prioritize this? What was a reasonable goal? How could we make progress to do the right thing and still be fiscally conservative? We're basically putting in $200,000 a year into this program. We've really been able to stretch it substantially. Doing simple plans. A lot of our sidewalk replacements have basically been GIS mapping, saying this is where we have our current sidewalk. These are our standard details. These are our cross slopes. We will put on the Connecticut DOT ramp specifications, and we'll just do simple call outs. We found this to be a much better investment, where we spend more time with a good contractor during construction and a little bit less time having the best set of plans available. And we've worked with some smaller contractors and had really good success getting a good product at a very affordable price. We are planning, like I said, 7 years to get the sidewalks in compliance, 15 years to get all of the ramps in compliance. Best part of the day is talking about lessons learned. As I mentioned, we found simple plans work the best using the GIS mapping. We complete the ramps with our sidewalk rehabilitation. And of course, anytime we do any paving, if we pave a road, we have to catch up on the ramp at that point as well. We found that it is better to, just as we did in woodshop, measure twice, cut once. We found that before we have the contractor place any concrete, we send out our inspector or one of our engineering staff to confirm and verify all of the slopes and dimensions. Easier to fix it before you have concrete setting up. Better to be safe than sorry, and certainly that is something we learned the hard way. And where possible, we have used either cast iron detectable warning strips or replaceable tactile warning panels, especially in areas like along our bike paths and things where we know they're getting plowed with pickup trucks. The plastic just doesn't hold up. So we're always looking to have something that's going to be a little bit more durable. So with that kind of wraps up my portion kind of from Simsbury's perspective. And I don't know, Sean, do you want to have all of the questions at the end, or if you want to look at taking some questions now?
I don't see any questions in the chat now.
Okay.
There will be some later, so we'll answer everybody's questions, it looks like. So we will go right from your presentation right over to Mike Wilson from Westcog.
Thank you, Sean. We are happy to share this project. Just a moment. There we go. The Western Connecticut Council of Governments, it's one of 9 COGs in the state, serves as a forum for municipal chief elected officials come together and discuss issues of common interest and cooperation. We also look for every opportunity to assist and complement work being done by the municipalities to make this a better place. Westcog is geographically and demographically diverse. We have 18 municipalities, a mixture of urban, suburban, and rural. The population varies from our smallest community, Bridgewater, to the largest, Stamford. The municipal resources vary as well, both in terms of finance and staff. How did Westcog get involved with ADA? Well, it's an unfunded mandate. There are requirements that are numerous, detailed, specific, and from a municipal point of view, some of them are burdensome. So in the 35 years that the law has been in effect, a patchwork has developed of communities acting in good faith to address the ADA requirements with varied results. In our region, some have done partial plans and some have been unable to do anything. Our thought was we would try to bring everybody up to as close to full compliance as we can get. The requirements are the same for every municipality, and doing several of them at once provides the opportunity for economies of scale. When we talk about ADA requirements, we are talking about, I'm sure most people know this already, but we're talking about Title II of ADA, which pertains to government and public sector entities. And there's two major pieces. One is accessibility for people with disabilities, not only buildings, but facilities, parks, and trails. And then the other aspect is policy and programs, how things that are done are accessible or not to people with disabilities. The approach that we took, this is specialized work requiring special expertise. We issued an RFQ and received 6 responses. We interviewed all 6 firms, and after consideration and references, selected a firm named WT Group, which is based out of Illinois. We negotiated a contract with them that extends for 2 years, and this work is being funded by Westcog's Regional Services Grant, which are funds that every cog gets from OPM. Just to take a note, some exceptions to the work include, of our 18 municipalities, 2 communities have already completed transition plans, so we are proceeding with the other 16. The public right-of-way, sidewalks, roads, crosswalks, and access are excluded because, as I'm sure you'll hear more about later, the state DOT has taken the lead on addressing those. Also, the state is responsible for major transport infrastructure, rail, bus, and ports. This project excludes school and facilities under the jurisdiction of boards of education. And the project excludes housing, and several municipalities provide public housing. Those are excluded. And then several municipalities have various facilities which are leased out by private operators and used for their own purposes. The steps in the process, first is to confirm the inventory, buildings, facilities, parks, and trails, sorting through those exceptions above. The next step is coordination. Each municipality has formed a project management group consisting of staff with responsibilities that overlap facilities and access. The groups generally meet monthly as the activity of the project proceeds. And the next step is site access audits, where the consultants have come and inspected the facilities. And here are some examples of inspections and results. A lot of ADA is about dimensions and slope, and there are examples of every site that's been examined and studied. And those are some examples. Now, once these access audits are completed, two things happen. One is they produce site reports where each individual site is documented, its current condition, the deficiency, and the recommended improvement. And then there's a larger program that is discussed at the community engagement stage. There's another step where the program and policy review, the consultants interview town staff, and the people who at the town level who are interviewed are ones who have authority over granting or denying requests for accommodations by people with disabilities. And the next stage, community engagement, is where these results are presented and reaction received. This includes live meetings, it includes surveys, and then they often work with local advocacy groups. The purpose of community engagement, by and large, is the list of retrofits necessary is extended over a considerable period of time. And so the essence of community engagement is to prioritize the retrofits. What should be done first? And then here are some suggestions and prompts that people can discuss. Is it based on location or how busy it is, or what we call the basic? And then that feedback is gathered. And then that goes into the transition plan. And the subsequent step is the capital report, where cost estimates are prepared for the improvements, and that's incorporated into a final report. This is the sequence of events from the audits to the site reports, engagement, transition plan, and with the other dimensions entering in. This is the schedule. We began in September 2024, and as you might imagine, it's impractical to proceed with 16 communities all at once. So we divided them into 4 groups of 4. We call them quads. And this is the schedule. The first 2 quads are underway. The first one due for completion in late spring, and the second one in the summer. And then the third and fourth quads will be active. We'll start acting in the fall and be active next year. And then finally, some observations and takeaway. This is a work in progress. We are about 25% through the program, and we are learning as we go. The ADA coordinators, each municipality must have one by law. Most municipalities have assigned that responsibility to someone whose primary job is something else, but they have stepped up admirably in terms of working with the consultants and cooperating. And then numerous clarifications of the ADA requirements have been made through interaction and study. And then we've learned that municipalities do things differently in terms of who is in charge of what and how things are done. And then the last observation is that the program does include training. There'll be 2 training sessions at the end of the program. The one on facility and park infrastructure and the other one on policy requirements. So our conclusion is that we are happy with this project. We are looking forward to successful completion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. That was very interesting. And during your presentation, a couple of questions have popped up. One of them is, do you have contractors who do utility main installs and full curb to curb restoration, make the corners ADA compliant? Mike, do you know that answer that individual for the towns?
Um, our contractor, our consultant does not do that. The curb things are one of the things that's excluded from our study.
Okay, so Tom, same question to you.
Yeah, I think that might have been more of a Simsbury one. We have not had our utility contractors install ramps where there are not currently ramps. We've been very fortunate in most of our utility work that's been going on has been primarily water main replacements. And we've actually bought out the final roadway restoration, and then we would have our own highway department staff assess whether or not we needed ramps, and we would do the ramps through our ramp program.
Gotcha.
So I guess the simple answer is we don't have utility contractors building ramps for us.
Easy enough. And then this one is for you specifically, Tom. Did you have any pushback from the public, and how much communication was had with the businesses and residents?
We on the sidewalk replacements, there's been zero pushback. New sidewalks is a whole nother story, as probably most of the people on this call know. I see a couple of head nods. We send out letters in advance, about 6 weeks in advance, letting people know the sidewalk's coming, what to expect, marking sprinkler heads, not parking on the street, and it's been everybody's been very supportive because within the neighborhood or the business, they're getting a new enhanced sidewalk, and it seems to be well received.
Great. And then a question popped up that Mike already answered. Is your ADA coordinator an individual person or position, or is an add-on to an existing position? Tom, is it the same for you?
I'm going to call that other related duties.
Sean, just one comment. Of our 16 municipalities, there is one who has a ADA coordinator with no other responsibilities. The others all have shared responsibilities.
Gotcha. Thanks, Mike. And here's a comment here, in case you're wondering, town of Guilford requires utility companies to upgrade their ramps for ADA compliance if they're disturbed during their work. So it's an option to build into the contract, I assume. All right, so thank you, Tom and Mike, and we'll turn it around to Katie Hedberg from Condot.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So today I'm going to be presenting on our department's ADA transition plan update, some trainings and public outreach that our group has done, and then some 2025 updates. So to just start off, our ADA engineering coordination unit was started in 2019. We have 3 full-time staff, myself, Kamado Simpson, and Julio Serna. Our group's responsibilities range from the department's transition plan, coordination with municipalities, coordination with members of the public and other external entities. We also will get involved if Department of Justice or Federal Highway are conducting investigations. We do trainings and outreach, and then we also review technical and feasibility forms. Sometimes we'll get questions from design, construction, or maintenance, and we'll also be a resource for that. Just to start, for my personal story with ADA, when I was in high school, my brother, who was 7, was diagnosed with a rare bone cancer. And while he was going through treatments and surgeries, he was in a wheelchair. And it opened our family's eyes to when there wasn't a curb ramp or other barriers, trying to move around a 7-year-old and picking up a wheelchair was sometimes feasible, but not always. So with ADA, it's not necessarily a one type demographic. It could be short term or long term. As previously mentioned, just some law background. So the ADA was signed in 1990 and is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities, regardless of the funding source. Within ADA, there's 5 different titles. Today, we're pretty much focused on Title II, and my group specifically looks at that. For DOT, we have a separate ADA coordinator who does Title I with employment. Previously to 1990, though, there were 2 other federal laws that were specifically looking at federal funding. That was the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Architectural Barriers Act in 1968. For the transition plan, this is required by the Title II law. There's typically 4 elements with identifying the physical barriers that limit accessibility, methods to remove them, a schedule of work, and the names of the responsible parties for plan implementation. For the department's self-evaluation and transition plan monitoring, the plan is intended to be a living document. So for ours, we're targeting formally updating once every 4 years. And then for reporting or any attachments, those might be more frequently updated. Our progress is monitored through various meetings with Federal Highway, the Chief Engineer's Office, and the Commissioner. And to give an idea for our transition plan, we have had a number of different draft forms and finals since the 1990s. Each year there might have been a new inclusion for a different asset as the department's responsibilities have changed. The older versions at one point had Bradley Airport. So as our focus shifts with responsibilities, the plan also evolves. And for our 2024, it is in final draft to be resubmitted to Federal Highway for their records. So in our update, we had 15 major assets that were highlighted: rail facilities, rest areas, sidewalks, transit facilities, highway administration buildings, curb ramps, ferry service run by Connecticut DOT, electric vehicle charging stations, multi-use trails, service plazas, park and ride lots, crosswalks, pedestrian signals, on-street parking, and bus stop and shelters. We also had roundabouts and at-grade rail crossings included as well. So each of these had an update for where the inventory is, what progress is going on for the self-evaluation. From our transition plan, we did have a website update, and our main landing page now has a dedicated section for the ADA transition plan. It also includes the ADA paratransit services and then technical resources. Throughout the presentation, Julio is going to be dropping in links to these, and then the slides will also be shared. From our transition plan, we did have a public outreach requirement. So for the first time, we went out to in person. Previously, there had been just email or phone call comments. So for our public outreach summary, we had 6 in-person sessions that were held throughout Connecticut. We coordinated these with the Council of Governments and municipalities to find host locations. We had 2 virtual sessions that were hosted by Zoom, and then 3 special events where there was like a state conference. From our in-person session, we had a presentation that went through the entire transition plan update, and then we had a number of different activities where individuals can review the asset sheets for the specific items that were included in the transition plan and highlight what their priority focus is that the department should be looking at. We also had copies of the plan for individuals to look through and different resources that our group has. From the outreach survey, we had 24 submitted. The highest number of interest was with sidewalks at 15%, curb ramps at 13%, bus stops and shelters was at 14%. So those were what members of the public thought were the most important to them for being addressed. And then this is just our high overview of attendance at the different events, and what number of questions or feedback we had received. From our transition plan update, we did do a Title II survey for our municipalities. We had 169 towns submit where their ADA Title II status was. Questions included, do you have a transition plan? Have you completed a self-evaluation? Do you have an ADA coordinator? So from the responses, it helped create a new program that's coming up to give support for the self-evaluation and ADA transition plans within the municipalities. It's going to be reviewing ADA compliance within the public right-of-way, so the sidewalks, bus stops, and shelters, curb ramps, crosswalks, and pedestrian signals. We had our solicitation closed last year, September 2024, and a consultant selection was made in January 2025 for the beta group as the prime. And then they had 3 subs, Pathview, SLR, and VN engineers. The pilot program is intended to begin with NVCOG region, so that's Naugatuck Valley, in this year. And then we're going to rotate around to the other regions following the pilot program. And updates will be shared with the different council and governments once we have an estimate timeline for when the work will be coming to your municipality. Now I'm just going to go over some overviews. So for the ADA standards guidance and Connecticut DOT directives, the U.S. Access Board is a entity that puts out guidance for these ADA laws. So one of the items is the Public Rights-of-Way Accessibility Guidelines. This was a draft from 1999 that has evolved over the years. The DOT adopted PROAG in 2019, and this was the 2013 guidelines. We do have a new directive coming up that will adopt the 2023 guidelines. From the 2023 guidelines, these have been adopted at the federal level by the General Services Administration in 2024, and then US DOT adopted the transit section in December. From our federal highway update, there are 34 states that have already adopted PROAG. And if you have any questions specifically about the resources that the Access Board has, there are 2 emails. One is the TA Access board.gov, that's general guidelines questions, and then the ROW at accessboard.gov is specifically about public rights-of-way and streets and sidewalks. For Connecticut DOT, we do have an ADA technical resources page. It's organized by if there's a specific event, and materials are shared there. We also have a growing training video library that has short videos on different topics. We also have a number of different quick guide sheets and sample inspection forms. And then for our ADA trainings and outreach, we partner with the T2 Center to help with providing more background for what DOT has coming up, what resources, and one of the best things, if you've been able to attend one of their ADA classes, is they break up the classroom portion with an outdoor experience where you're using a mobility device to see how they interface. It breaks up the class and it allows you to have a perspective of what individuals face on a daily basis. In this class, we'll also go over inspections and how to inspect a curb ramp or sidewalk. This training has evolved into going to also different conferences. So we presented at TRB and got to also showcase for push button heights when those are set at a higher elevation. That is that would be difficult for someone to reach. And then we also do student outreach for STEM engagement with students. So with the TRB session, there is a video on LinkedIn that you can see what else was covered at it. It's called the Empathy at the Intersection. And this was really great being able to share what our trainings are at a national level to help other states with getting their toolkits up and running and being able to provide a more greater training. With our ADA anniversary and outdoor classroom event, this is turning into an annual event where we celebrate the ADA and we hear from different communities what their ADA progress is. We have residents come and speak on their specific experience and how the ADA has impacted them and improved their lives. And there's different exhibits that showcase different vendors who have products. We had the paratransit van to demonstrate how our paratransit services work and the trainings that those drivers go through. So the 2025 date is coming soon. So we'll be sharing that when it's ready. We're coordinating with NVCOG to be our hosting location for this year. And then just to recap on that same training link, it has a brochure of what was actually featured in the toolkit from the T2 Center and our group. So there are different vision goggles that replicate different visual impairments. There are wheelchairs and walking canes. The newest addition is a sample form work. So that way when you're training new staff, before they get out to the field, they can see what a form work might look like and test it out. And really just driving home why this is important. So for roadway alterations and curb ramps, as Tom mentioned, the Department of Justice and Department of Transportation have a joint technical assistance memo that outlines what the differences are between maintenance activities and alteration activities. When alteration activities happen, the curb ramps must be upgraded. So for a state project that's going in, we have this example showing for the curb ramps that are impacted by the state paving project, those would get upgraded. If there's a receiving ramp of one of the ones that is being upgraded as a good faith effort where we're able to, we will also upgrade that one. So that's what curb ramp 3, 4, and 5 are showing. Curb ramps 1 and 2 are set back from the roadway. They are not impacted by the project and would not be scheduled to be upgraded. For our curb ramps, we do have an ongoing inventory inspecting all the state crossing curb ramps. We use Esri tools called Field Maps and Survey 123. They're mobile device apps that look like what's shown on the screen. They have a number of different fields for what the PROAG requirements are for curb ramps. And this all gets saved into our dashboard. So for our annual pavement programs, we have 3: maintenance resurfacing program, pavement preservation, and then the pavement rehabilitation and reconstruction program. When a project comes through, we'll look at what the project limits are and what curb ramps aren't compliant that would be included in the project. So this is just a screen share of what our dashboard looks like on our end. And then just going over the basics. So for typically we're seeing 3 types of curb ramps: a perpendicular curb ramp where there's a landing provided at the top, a parallel curb ramp where the landing's provided at the bottom, and then a blended transition that is specifically less than 5% running slope and extends the full corner where the 2 crosswalks might meet. For the perpendicular and parallel, those curb ramps have a up to 8.3% cross running slope. So it's important just to note those 2 differences. We do have a guide sheet library that has over 30 different types of curb ramps using the ProAg requirements. These have been laid out to help with designers getting a guidance on how to build curb ramps. So that link is online, and it will download as a zip file into a PDF package. So it's easy to go in and see the concrete sidewalk ramps. There's about 11 or 12 sheets that will download. And then just walking through curb ramps through the entire project phase. You're going to look at the existing conditions, go through the design with the guide sheets. Maybe you might need to upgrade the guide sheets depending on what your actual limits are for the field, the construction, and then your finished product. So you're going to want to inspect at almost every phase of the job to ensure that your finished product is correct. So like I mentioned before, our newest tool, you would never dig before you called. So we're trying to push check before it's placed. Once the concrete's placed, you cannot fix it. So we have a number of different pictures showing where checking the form could be done for the different types of curb ramps, where the different measurements would be taken. It's very important checking both the running slopes and the cross slopes. And then another item to be aware of is making sure that if you're working in an area where there are existing pedestrian facilities like a push button, that the proposed work is going to be inclusive of those. So in this situation, originally, the formwork was supposed to just be parallel to meet up with the existing sidewalk, and it would have formed a reach gap of over 10 inches. So the 10 inches is the maximum. I believe it was almost 20 inches. So the contractor was able to adjust the formwork to extend to that push button to avoid any impacts. Next is detectable warning surface. This is a huge thing that we're seeing from the law. The detectable warning surface must extend the full width of the ramp. If you have a 5-foot wide ramp and only a 4-foot wide detectable warning surface, it won't meet the full width. So it's very important that that gets checked. In this situation, the contractor was able to get a 5-foot detectable warning surface. Another item is the detectable warning surface must be a contrasting color. When you're using special provisions or special concrete, if your standard detectable warning surface is brick red and you're using red concrete, it will blend in and not be compliant. So this was an example where ramps had to be upgraded to be gray to have that contrasting color. And then Tom had mentioned cast iron. So cast iron is meant to rust, and that's typical. Depending on how long the product has been outside, the contractor could arrive with it already rusted, or it'll show up as gray and rust over time. We're seeing this issue where brick is being used because as it rusts to the brick red, it then is camouflaged with the brick surface. So that's something to be aware of. On-street parking is also a requirement that has ADA accessibility. So the state does install on-street parking where it's warranted in projects. However, we won't maintain that spacing. It'll be transferred to municipalities under agreements. During resurfacing projects, the parking spaces are not striped, but municipalities may apply for the striping under the encroachment permit process. Traffic engineering is responsible for the establishment of parking restrictions along roadway. So if you're working in any of those kind of limiting where parking is allowed, the traffic group would work with that. And we just have some examples of projects that have included ADA parking. Um, From the 2013 version, there was requirements for hatching. In the 2023 version, there is no more hatching for the access aisle noted. So these are all from that previous one. This is just a different style where it's stall parking instead of the parallel parking. And then another thing we wanted to mention that has been brought up to our group is the difference between the two symbols. So for our state statute, we have the dynamic symbol, which is shown on the left of the screen. There is still the federal symbol that's recognized by the ADA, Department of Justice, Federal Highway. Because our dollars are attached to federal highway, especially with the manual on uniform traffic control devices. Our standard drawings are defaulted to show this symbol, especially when federal funding is used. However, if there's state funding used, you might see this new symbol. Sidewalks for responsibility, those fall to the municipality. However, if they're on state maintained bridges, those fall to the state for responsibility. Some municipalities transfer their responsibility to the abutting property owner. For transit stops and shelters, it's important that there is a level boarding access provided, especially in instances where we have that grass patch. We live in New England, so there's snow, so sometimes snow gets built up in that area. However, where there's a bus stop, it's really important that an access is provided, because what happens is when the bus deploys its ramp, an individual using a mobility device won't be able to access the bus. So this is an example where we installed a boarding pad. And then the last thing to be mindful of is the temporary traffic control and construction. So under PROAG, alternate pedestrian access routes must have the same level of accessibility as the current surface or the surface that's being closed. So we've had a few projects where on the bottom we had closed one side of the bridge, and we had gotten requests for members of the community to extend our crossing time to allow them more time to cross the street, so that way they can have when they're adjusting their detour, the pedestrian detour. So that was something that our group worked with traffic. Other times with roadwork signs, being mindful where the sign is actually being placed, that it's detectable, but it's not impeding the travel way that is not intended to be closed. And then getting into physical constraints. So where it is not able to make things compliant, it is required to meet them the maximum extent feasible. There's a number of different things that might play into it, such as underlying terrain, underground structures, adjacent developed facilities, drainage, or the presence of a significant natural or historic feature. To document that we had the maximum extent feasible done, we have our technical and feasibility form. So this is the current form that the department uses for non-standard facilities. The form has pages 3 through 7, instructions and background information for each of the sections. And we also have a section where it describes if the project is receiving federal or state funds, but being administered locally, who would be signing off on that form. Typically, it's the local public works director or the highest ranking official. Our group works with municipalities and designers who have any questions when completing the form. And then I just have some examples of what forms we've seen. So where the grade for a new sidewalk can't be met because the adjacent roadway is steep. This is a sample that we had gotten submitted for when utilities are impacting. Will receive a copy of the plan and additional documentation for and then just an update, we do have a new form that's coming out soon with that new 2023 directive for PROAG. So this is just a draft of what it'll look like. It's pretty much the same, except we've added some additional signature lines and have readjusted our future considerations. With that, I'll turn it over to any questions.
Thanks, Katie, and thanks to Julio for putting all the links in the comments for us. There's an old question for Mike. Which town had a dedicated ADA coordinator?
The answer is the city of Norwalk.
Thank you. Somebody wants to connect directly to that person. And then I missed a question earlier for Tom. It said as a part of the sidewalk and / curb updates, did the town of Simsbury consider pedestrian safety zones outside of school zones?
Ooh, great question. We did not consider pedestrian safety zones as part of our sidewalk enhancement program. I think we're looking at that more as part of our pedestrian and bike master plan. I'm going to say we're thinking about it, but we have not actually designated any at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody want to throw any more questions into this chat before we wrap up for the day? Seeing none so far, I want to thank our presenters one more time. Thank you all for being here. If you think of any questions, please feel free to follow up with me and we'll get them to the appropriate people. Thank you everyone for joining us. Much appreciated.